You're listening to The Higher Ed Marketer, a podcast geared towards marketing professionals in higher education. This show will tackle all sorts of questions related to student recruitment, donor relations, marketing trends, new technologies, and so much more. If you're looking for conversations centered around where the industry is going, this podcast is for you. Let's get into the show.
Welcome to the Higher Ed Marketer podcast, where we have conversations with higher ed professionals that we admire to learn from for you and for us. I'm Troy Singer, and I'm here with Bart Kaler, and we get to interview one of the people that we follow on LinkedIn that we're so impressed. He works both in the B2B space, but also in the higher marketer space. So, Bart, tell everyone a little bit about Dan Sanchez.
Yeah, so Dan Sanchez is somebody that I met recently through another person, and he does go by the hashtag DanChez on LinkedIn, and he's just a really fascinating guy. He made a big impact for a very small school that I'm aware of. It's a small Bible college called Bethany Global University up in Minneapolis, and then I later learned that he also did B2B marketing through a podcast. And actually, full transparency, the company he's with, SweetFish Media, produces the Higher Ed Marketer podcast for us. And so we've been partners with them since late last year. And so it's been great to kind of get to know Dan, but also to kind of know that origin story of the impact that he made at a very small college, and how the incredible growth that he was able to do through a lot of marketing on small budgets. And so a lot of what we'll talk about today is, what that looked like and how that came about.
He is one of the most interesting follows that you can have on LinkedIn, and we're so excited to have a conversation with him. So instead of just talking about how good he is, let's bring him into the conversation. Please help me welcome Dan Sanchez, Director of Audience Growth with SweetFish Media, and also previously with Bethany Global University, to the Higher Ed Marketer podcast. Dan, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Our pleasure. If you could give us a little bit about your background and what you currently do to help marketers like us, both outside of higher ed, but within the B2B space as well.
Certainly. So currently I am the Director of Audience Growth for SweetFish Media. And it's a company focused on helping B2B brands produce podcasts. I often just meet with a lot of customers and talk about how to grow a podcast audience specifically. But before that, I was working at a higher education institution called Bethany Global University, where I was the marketing director for about 6 years. And I started as a marketing department of one and grew. We were able to grow. This is not just me. There's always more than just one person, but me and the admissions team, were able to triple the enrollment of the university in a short amount of time. And the department grew from me to a department of about 24 to 25 people.
Wow. I thought I knew you and I follow you and have had conversations, but I didn't realize that you had the growth at Bethany International like you did. So thank you for sharing that. And I must say that Bart and I utilize SweetFish Media to produce this podcast. So we know your dynamics and we want to share it with our other brethren in higher ed marketing. Bart?
Yeah, I appreciate you being here, Dan. And I just wanted to, I'm glad, Troy, you kind of made the transparency for everybody that we do work with SweetFish Media. But I think the reason that we are working with SweetFish is kind of an interesting story, which brings us back to Bethany Global. I do a lot of work with small Bible colleges and small faith-based institutions. And the director of admissions, Ken Freer at Bethany Global University, and I have been connected, and we've attended several conferences together and have gotten to know each other pretty well through LinkedIn. And I know Ken is a really good friend of yours, Dan, and that's really how the introduction happened, is that as I was talking to Ken about some of his marketing and what was going on at BGU, he kind of talked about some of the success that you guys have had together when you were at BGU together. And when I looked you up and saw that you were with SweetFish Media now, and I started looking into SweetFish Media, and I saw that, wow, it's podcast. That's pretty cool. And I think one thing led to another, and here we are on episode 28 or whatever of our podcast. And so but I wanted everybody on the show to understand that it kind of came out of higher ed and then kind of went to the podcast, and now we're coming full circle. And so it's really great to be able to kind of talk about, now that you and I have a relationship through SweetFish, to be able to talk about what you did at BGU, because I do think that made such a impact. And some of the stats that you just talked about, obviously it's not one person that does it. It's and depending on where people are, there's credit for a lot of people. There's also divine intervention many times on these campuses. And so I think it's important to kind of talk about that. But one of the things I wanted to talk about was just, where did you start with? I mean, you come on campus, 6-7 years ago. I don't know how long it was when you arrived, but most very small schools, and just to kind of put it in context, I mean, what's the enrollment at BGU? I think it's important for people to understand.
I think it's currently at about 360 to 370.
Okay.
You know how that's always kind of going up and down.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's pretty typical. That's pretty typical of what I would consider small Bible colleges. I mean, it's a very specific part of Christian higher education, part of higher education in general. But that's a typical size of some of these smaller schools. And I think sometimes when you look at that, and I know that we've talked to people from Purdue and University of Kentucky, and this is a different type of podcast today, because I mean, it's one thing when you have a student body of 55,000 people. It's another thing when you have a student body of 360. And so the challenges that come with going in scale down obviously comes with the how much money you have to spend. And I know a lot of people get very frustrated, whether you're a marketing department at a large school or a marketing department at a small school. I so many times hear, boy, if we just had a little bit more money, we could do so much more. But you didn't have just a little bit more money. So tell us kind of what that was about, Dan, and how that kind of informed you and what you did about that. Because obviously you didn't just sit by and say, oh, woe is me.
Yep. And I'm willing to share as many details and numbers as I could possibly remember. I actually was working at an agency that I wasn't really happy in when Ken, the guy you mentioned, he got put in charge of marketing and admissions, because he's kind of an operations guy. They're like, hey, Ken, you've run a call center before. We just laid off the admissions guy. You're in charge now. And he's like, okay. But he's kind of a go-get-it kind of person. So he calls one of the closer friends he has that he knows marketing, and that was me. But I was 26. Like, I wasn't that old, I was kind of like just starting in my career, but I was doing well in a marketing agency, and it had just been acquired by another agency that was a shopper marketing agency, which is like the kind of stuff you do to sell more packaged consumer goods at like Walmart and grocery stores and stuff. Not my favorite thing, the direction that was heading. So naturally, a phone call turned to advice, turned to paid consulting, turned to freelance, turned to lots of freelance. And then I was like, okay, I think I'd like to work there full time. So I had such a good time. So I actually did the whole website for them, and a little bit of branding work, not a lot, but it's just cleaning things up and helping them get back on track, running some AdWords. And then I came on full time. The budget at the time was probably, somewhere around $80,000 to $90,000. And most of that went to Weber, which is like a poor school's way to like outsource financial aid.
Right.
I think about half of it went to Weber. So there's not much left, considering that, and that's not including salaries. That's just including budget. But then you have some operational costs in there, printing brochures and advertising. I think my advertising budget was $30,000 when I first started, which just isn't a big budget for a school. It is tiny, but they only had an incoming class the year before at 44 students, which is like so small. And even for an ABHE school, that's like low. That's like, we're not accredited yet. We're just starting in the accreditation process. And ABHE is like, we don't know if we want to give you accreditation because your enrollment's not looking good. They're like, yeah, but if we get accredited, enrollment will improve. They're like, it's like a chicken and the egg problem, right? But that was my task. I came in, but I also saw an opportunity from the outside, because they didn't know it, but they actually were sitting on a really good position, because they're a school that was highly focused on just one degree. And they only trained Christian missionaries, and they had a way of doing it that was kind of unique. And I knew enough from my like working at other Christian nonprofits and having that kind of a background that there's at least a few thousand people that are thinking about becoming that are an aspiring missionary. Like, they want to figure out how to get to the mission field. I also knew that there's not really a clear path to get there. Like, how does one become a missionary exactly? Like, even if you're listening to this and you're you're not a Christian, you're not in that camp. Like, how do you think people get there? Like, do they go to college? Do they just go? Do they contact their pastor? Like, what's the steps for that? So I knew there would be a market for it. They actually saw it at the time as it was too limited, right? And that's how a lot of small schools feel like, oh, if only we had more degree programs, we would attract a larger audience. I actually feel like it's the opposite. By being more focused, you can actually create more momentum. And instead of just focusing, sometimes in Bethany's case, instead of just focusing regionally, I went nationally because I knew I could just try to attract a very specific kind of person. So with a small budget, we actually focused at first on just real, like not branding, not even like large strategy stuff, was just trying to craft the right value proposition, trying to get the right message in front of just the right person, which for us, for the size of our budget and so it's such a niche type of person you're trying to look for. The only two mediums we could really find them on, and it's still kind of a struggle to this day, and I can talk about that later, was Google AdWords, people searching for it. Luckily, there was some search volume for this, and Facebook. We actually got really lucky that right about the time I was considering Facebook ads is right when they started putting ads in the newsfeed. And we took advantage that summer. Like it was only a few months after they first started doing that. And that's when Facebook ads really started to go crazy. We split tested things. We used lots of creative. We tried to hone it in, run people to a landing page, get them to request a brochure. And then slowly but surely, we kind of built out the process for how to follow up with them in order to get them to apply and walk the rest of the way down the admissions funnel. But it was a really simple step. You're talking one landing page and digital ads, and then just trying to craft the message right and trying to find the right person. The real secret sauce, though, is that they had a really clear mission and focus for the school, and it was easy to tie that focus to the right kind of person who had a very strong need for that kind of thing that wasn't well represented elsewhere.
Right.
So that was the advantage of Bethany. And I knew it coming in that all I had to do was kind of like dust it off and like figure out how to get it in front of the right people. Not all colleges have it that easy. It's not like it was easy. It took work, but it was at least a clearer path.
Yeah, but I do think it's important because I constantly tell people this, because when I ask them, well, tell me what's unique about your school, they say, well, we have small class sizes, we're faith-based, we have community. I'm like, okay, that separates you from, one segment of higher education, but how does it segment you from every other school that can say the same thing? So I always try to really encourage people to really think about what are the distinctives that really we do better than anybody else. And whether that is, preparing missionaries, whether that's, discipleship, whether it's just about the way that, where they're located, the geography. I mean, I'm working with a school right now that, is literally on the waterfront. I mean, they're on a big intercoastal waterfront, and you can get in a boat from their campus and go out to the Atlantic Ocean. How many campuses can say that? And so you've really got to figure out how to grow where you're planted. And I think that's really what you were leaning into.
Yeah, we're in Minnesota, so hard to advertise that. I play that down a lot. I wouldn't say Minnesota. I would say Minneapolis because it felt a little bit more metropolitan, because people are like, isn't it cold up there? Like, well, it's only as cold as the kind of jacket you wear.
It's 72 indoors right now.
So cold weather, just bad clothes, and we'll help you find this stuff when you get here.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about, just tactically and practically. We try to be as pragmatic as we can here on the podcast, but tell me a little bit about, obviously you're new, you're going in, obviously Ken is a friend of yours, but at the same time, you're going in and saying, hey, I think we need to do this. I think we need to spend here. I think we need to start doing this. There was obviously some risk that was going to be taken because, they weren't doing that before. And how did you do that? I guess a lot of people might say, okay, I buy what you're saying, Dan. I can get my head wrapped around that, but you know what? My boss isn't just going to say, oh yeah, let's just start jumping into this.
Yep. I would try to find as many unique identifiers as possible, and I would go hunting for them from your students over and over again. Like I would literally just try to go to students that are brand new. So the ones that haven't been in your university and haven't been indoctrinated yet by why they show up, because they all start to sound the same once they've been there a while. So finding people, and you could call them, like the people that are planning on coming or they're really close to showing up, you could call them, but I find I usually just like to talk to them on arrival day and on campus preview weekend. Those guys are gold. And then I ask them like, oh, like what's special? What's special about this place? What's special? Like why would you come here versus somewhere else? and I try to look for the common thread of what they're talking about. What the answers they give me are literally while I start testing out messages when I has later on in Facebook or on a landing page where I could split test. Okay, out of the 5 things that they're saying all the time that I think are actually pretty unique, or at least they're telling me are unique, which one's the top one? Which one should I put as the headline versus the other ones are supporting bullets or something like that? And I just test and test to figure out which one is the one that's the most attractive. So every school has something going for it. I mean, you're already a school. It's not like you're starting off as a startup and you have an unvalidated market. You have a market. Most schools would do well just to polish up what they have that's already good. And like Bart, like you were saying, sometimes it's the location. Sometimes you're in Colorado, and what more do you need to say?
Right.
Sometimes you're on an ocean. Sometimes it's the region. Sometimes you're on an old farm in the mountains somewhere that just has a rustic coolness to it. Sometimes you have a specialty program that's kind of unique, and hitting that as hard as possible. That's usually if other schools talk to me, and a couple have come my way just because they want to figure out what BGU did to be successful. And this is usually the advice I'm giving, is to help them find that thing. Tactically too, I've learned that there's this term in B2B that is not, at least I never heard it in higher ed, and I never heard it in the nonprofit world, called marketing ops. Marketing ops is incredibly important. It's something we did really, really well at BGU. And that's one of the reasons why we were able to get so much done on such a small budget. Marketing ops is essentially the evolution of marketing automation. Marketing automation was the term a couple of years ago, but because marketing automation's become so big, because marketing automation's covered more than just marketing now, it's turned into marketing operations. I was really heavily involved in like the CRM, and actually the whole CRM and what the call center uses and the admissions team even uses all the way up until they register as students was heavily influenced from marketing. In fact, I'm the one who picked the CRM and put it and actually started building it in place. And originally it was just me building out even the workflows for all the call center to like follow up with students on. And we use this small business CRM for small schools. You can get away with it.
Yeah.
You don't have to use Populi for your CRM for marketing. If you're using something like Populi, let's be honest, Populi is made for student management.
Right.
It's not made for marketing. So find a point where you can have a small business CRM that costs way less, but is still doable, even with a small, tiny budget, and use it, because small business CRMs and marketing automation platforms are actually highly capable of doing very sophisticated marketing campaigns. Like we used Infusionsoft, and I highly recommend it. Infusionsoft is wonderful. It's fairly robust for how much you pay for it, but even something like ActiveCampaign can almost do everything Infusionsoft can do, and actually it's arguably a little easier to use. HubSpot's fine too, but I find the price tag on HubSpot substantially more than Infusionsoft. So it kind of, if you're at the budget where like I was at, like starting at $80,000 a year, Infusionsoft is just fine. You can always transfer things over later.
Yeah, and we've come across one called Lead Squared, which also is it's got that marketing ops in it. It's the CRM and everything. And there's a lot of them out there, and I think it's just a matter of getting beyond the fact that I can't afford Slate, or I can't afford some of these big giant ones that Salesforce or other things, but they are out there. Small business CRMs and marketing ops, I think, is a really good point. Daniel, you kind of talked a little bit about, I want to go back just for a second on, when you talked about the social proof, being able to have these students come in on preview day or day one and just kind of give you a little bit of the raw data that you kind of crafted some of your messaging. I have to believe that some of that too that they were providing to you was either seeds for content or other elements within the marketing program. I mean, obviously you did more than just do messaging and pay-per-click ads. And I know that, following you in some of the conversations that we've had, I know you're a big believer in content marketing. Talk a little bit about that, because you might even kind of reference that blog that you and I talked about at once that, that you've been building out with, I think it's a different organization, but the idea that you're ranking higher on that blog than maybe some ones that people would expect.
So that was something that came in later. I would say the tripling of the school, mainly like 80% of that really came off the back of like AdWords, Facebook ads, and just a well-crafted like conversion funnel, like very Russell Brunson kind of style funnel. Probably a little nicer than his as far as like how it looks though. direct marketing kind of stuff, but like with a little bit more brand and visual emphasis because we're talking about young people. So I don't want to look too direct markety. So that was most of it. But the whole time I knew that like you don't want to depend only on like PPC to drive all your growth, right? Because we were like search, Facebook ads, referrals. I'm like, if we lose Facebook ads, we're in trouble. And Facebook's young and kind of reckless, in my opinion. And honestly, like because of the stuff Apple's done now, that's like kind of dying out now. Like Facebook ads are not as nearly as effective as they used to be. So a couple of years ago, we started putting an initiative and putting an emphasis on search engine optimization. And I believe blogging can be a lot more than search engine optimization. It could be for social. It could be to answer frequently asked questions, write a good blog post about it, have good testimonials for different questions for different stages of the funnel, different types of people. Blog posts serve a lot of purpose, and we did a lot of those. A lot of the people's favorite things we would craft whole pages around and whole blog posts around if they were coming here because of our tuition paid program. You're right. At BGU, you don't pay tuition. It's very unique. Actually, I had to bury that a little bit in the funnel because it was a little bit too good to be true for some people. So I had to let them discover that on their own, because if I said that in an ad, they'd be like, I don't believe you. They'd bounce. It's like, no, it's true. You still pay room and board, but no, you don't pay tuition. So we did all that. But yes, the SEO did start to pick up. And I actually learned SEO from mainly, I can't say one person, it's really two people, but one company, one YouTube channel. When I discovered their model on how to do search engine optimization, which was kind of anti-backlink and really just produce the best content for the search queries, like our SEO game took off. And we got so good at it so fast that we were publishing a ton of different blog posts on bethanygu.edu to rank for all the missions keywords. But I realized with a team of students, I could write blogs at a rate of 10 to 20 articles a week that were rank worthy. And because of that, we're like, well, let's just start a whole new site. Still a BGU site, but it's called justdisciple.com. And we started like hammering every Christian topic we could possibly find or think of. Now that site probably reached 250,000 page views this last month, or maybe 260. And now I'm like having a vision to like, oh, what does it take to get 1 million? Because that's what we're shooting for now. We're close to landing a grant so that I can hire a person, do nothing but focus on that website to take it there. That's kind of what we've used there. And and to mention the person where I learned SEO from, and I would recommend anybody who like, if you want to learn SEO yourself, they seem like two just dudes from Idaho figured out that you can do it without doing any backlinks or any off-site optimization. And they're called Income School. It's a YouTube channel. They do have a fairly inexpensive program that they really just teach bloggers how to rank and how to make an income via blogging, right? And it's probably the most reliable system I've seen. I actually tested it on a personal blog, and now my personal blog even gets 20K visits a month on the few blog posts that I've written there. But if you actually get a writer on it and start using their methodology, I even use it at SweetFish. I even use it for customers now of SweetFish Media who want to figure out how to craft good blogs that are rank worthy out of their podcasts. It's really utilizing their methodology. They have a couple of different things that are unique to them compared to like most of the SEO people out there. And I find that it's actually just approachable and easier to implement than all the other SEO crazy stuff that's out there. So that's been a big deal to try to offset the traffic that we were dependent on from Facebook ads. We're trying to diversify that a bit. And we have a couple different avenues we're doing that on, like influencer marketing, partnerships, but building up Just Disciple as a massive site that we could then, nurture the relationship down to the ones who want to go on mission trips to feed into BGU.
That's great. What was the name of that YouTube channel again?
Income School.
Okay, Income School. Thank you.
And their website's incomeschool.com. It's a fantastic resource.
Great. Well, I think that obviously this has been a really great conversation. One question I had, and I know the answer, but I wanted to kind of make sure that everybody else understands. I mean, you're a voracious reader, and I'm guessing that you do the same thing, not only with books, but also online and with YouTube videos, and just you're consuming content all the time. Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, how does that come about? And tell me about your kind of, your methodology on that. Because, I mean, obviously a lot of what you're doing, you have learned on the job, to say, per se, from all these experts.
Actually, my journey didn't start in college. I actually went right into a Christian internship and then just worked. And then later went to community college and dropped out because I hated school, which is funny to say as a higher ed marketer, but I hated college. I later went back to school, but if I would have gone to school right out of high school, I would have been an artist. And if I would have gone to school 2 years after going to school, I would have been a graphic designer. So I'm glad I actually waited and worked and found the thing that I really loved. And I really love marketing. I don't know what it is. It's just so flexible. There's so many applications for it. It's so helpful. It's so needed. It's also very profitable. But it's creative. It's fun. It's different from day to day. I get to work with people. I get to work with people on LinkedIn all the time and have podcasts like this with you guys here. It's so much fun. I can't believe I get paid to do this every day, So I fell in love with marketing, and I found that because I hadn't gone to school, I had to learn how to learn marketing. And it started with me just asking for book recommendations, reading it and testing out stuff. And that became kind of the model. I would read a book in the evening or early mornings and then go test it out in the day job as I was moving into marketing slowly in my career. Kind of started as the designer and worked into web design and then digital marketing and then just full on marketing. And I found that I would just get really excited about one topic and then hammer it as much as possible in a short season, wake up really early for a couple of months in a row and read and then experiment during the day. And it was different topics at different times. It started with like building websites, and then it went to AdWords, and then it went to conversion rate optimization. I started playing around with free tools there and some cheap paid tools. I have a background in just working at nonprofits and startups, which are like always underfunded. So I never had a lot of money to go and take massive classes or more than maybe if I was lucky, $1,000 conference. And that's including like travel and stuff. So I never really had a lot of like expensive resources, but just through books and the amount of stuff that's online, you can learn just about anything. I would suck dry any boss I had that knew more than I did. Like I would also just like get everything I can. I'm like, tell me everything you know. Like if they had a specialty in PR or media or anything, I'd also try to learn everything I could from each person I worked for or worked with. So I was just a voracious learner, even though I wasn't really a fan of higher ed. I did eventually go back to college and then earn my BS in marketing and my MBA, but
that's great.
It was only after learning the subjects and then I went back to school for it.
Took the tests. Very good. This has been great.
Dan, we end each episode and you've given us so much, but if there is one piece of advice you would give maybe ABHE size schools similar to BGU that they could implement right away, that you feel that could be very impactful, what advice would that be?
I think the thing that made us successful is I was able to do a lot with a little because I didn't outsource much. And if you have to be really strategic, if you outsource a little bit, like you probably only have enough money to outsource one thing. Outsource the thing that you're least competent in, and then everything else you kind of have to like learn or become competent in. So outsource your thing that's the hardest for you. That's good. And then the next probably whatever is like the best, like you're already leaning towards, like double down on that and learn everything you can about that. And then try to stair step it and learn one thing at a time. Like you might not have enough time to do SEO, but do you already have a capability of testing up messaging? And I would get, if you want to write more and you're kind of already a wordsmithing kind of person, then you should explore conversion rate optimization. It's probably the single biggest thing you can start doing with your website to increase your leads, and that's where you split test even your homepage to see which one gets a better bounce rate. Running all your ads and things to a single landing page so you can actually test what you should be saying, because you can find out and learn faster there what's actually working than random pages on your website. If you drive everybody to a singular page where the only thing they can do is request a brochure, and I do recommend specifically the call to action for any higher ed institution should be the request the brochure. I've tried out a bunch of different things. I don't know what it is. People like to get the brochure in the mail, and that's just another touch point that you can like follow up with them with. But I always ask for email, phone number, brochure, first name, last name, undergrad, grad, and what their high school graduation date is. I've worked with a lot of different fields. That is the money right there, was for us. And if I started at a new school today, those are the exact things I would ask again, because with that, you kind of have enough data to get going, and then you can figure out the rest later on. I would also stop spending money at trade shows. I don't know. I've not seen one college that's like, yeah, we're killing it. Maybe, okay, I take it back. I can think of one college that has killed it with a trade show. And it's only because they're big, they have a big budget, and they dominate the trade show. Not only with the biggest booth, but they have all their professors out in the sessions. and that's Midwestern Seminary in Kansas City.
Right.
I know they're killing it through that. So they can afford to do a whole takeover of a conference and get all their people out there so they can influence the pastors who are the ones who recommend where to go for seminary. But for most ABHE schools, I feel like you really have to learn how to move on to digital. I don't understand if you just do a cost analysis on trade shows and just show like how much you spent on it versus how many leads you get, then you have your cost per acquisition for lead, and it's usually outrageous.
Yeah.
Like just outrageous. Even if you're bad at Facebook ads, with as not great as Facebook ads currently is, you're probably going to get a better conversion rate than that, even in the beginning. You might also try Pinterest. Pinterest is actually not bad.
Yeah.
I think you just led into the next topic for when we have you back on the podcast. Thank you so much, Dan. And I think you're an excellent follow. How do you prefer people to either contact you or where can they follow you?
LinkedIn all day, every day. I'm very active on LinkedIn, which is how the three of us started really talking, right? So go to linkedin.com/in/digital marketing Dan, and you'll find me there. Shoot me a connection request. I'd love to connect.
Yeah, and your hashtag Sanchez, I think, is another one that they could follow.
Sanchez. Yep, you can follow the hashtag. I'm working on Sanchez.com. It's coming soon.
Very good.
Love it. Love it. Thanks again, Dan. Bart, any parting words from you?
Yeah, I just think that I think a lot of what Dan has talked about has been so applicable to just about any size school. I mean, I think a lot of what he said was specific to Association of Biblical Higher Education, the ABHE that we've been referring to, those small Bible schools and seminaries. But I think a lot of what Dan said is also applicable to, a marketing department at a major, university, public university. I think there's a lot of things that figure out what's going on, test, understand your particular market, and also understand what's distinctive about you that's going to move the needle. And I think all those things are really applicable to just about anyone. And so I would just really kind of encourage you to take a look at that, as well as be just that lifelong learner. I think that we all know that marketing moves at the speed of light right now. And so the more you can learn, the more you can pay attention, and the more that you can kind of lean in and kind of see what other people are talking about. I mean, that's one of the reasons I really like to follow Dan on LinkedIn with his comments that he's so generous to do on a daily basis, is that I'm seeing things that maybe I didn't know about. I'm learning things that I didn't understand. And we've got to do that together these days, because the idea of being able to either, go take a class on something is those days are gone. And so we've got to kind of take control of our own learning and figure out things and lean into that. So those are just a couple of thoughts I have, Troy.
Thank you, Bart. Well said. This was an excellent conversation. This podcast, The Higher Ed Marketer, is sponsored by Kaler Solutions, an education marketing and branding agency, and by Think Patented, a marketing execution, printing, and mailing provider of higher ed solutions. On behalf of Bart and myself, thank you for joining us.
You've been listening to The Higher Ed Marketer. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast player. If you're listening with Apple Podcasts, we'd love for you to leave a quick rating of the show. Simply tap the number of stars you think the podcast deserves. Until next time.